This is Inside the BFA, the official podcast of the Balloon Federation of America. Each episode of Inside the BFA is an open discussion of the many aspects of the sport of ballooning and the BFA's work to represent its members and the ballooning community at large. Now, here's your host, editor of the BFA's Ballooning Journal, Glenn Moyer.
Hello, and welcome once again to another issue of Inside the BFA. I'm Glenn Moyer. Tonight is part 2 of our continuing series on drone operations and the proposed FAR Part 108. I'm going to be joined again this evening by BFA Southeast Regional Director, Mr. Dave Sullivan, who will be leading our discussion, and so it's good to see Dave again. Our special guest tonight is Mr. Peter Sachs. Peter is the head of airspace integration at Zipline, where he is responsible for all standards, development activities, and UTM policy topics. Now, Zipline is an American robotics and autonomous delivery company operating the world's largest drone delivery network. The company has flown more than 130 million autonomous miles across multiple continents and now completes a delivery somewhere in the world every 30 seconds. Imagine that. UTM, for those not familiar perhaps with that term, is Unmanned Aircraft System Traffic Management. Say that 5 times fast. And Peter is the co-chair of the United States UTM Implementation Operations Committee, an elected governance body created by the companies deploying UTM shared airspace capabilities. He's a certified flight instructor as well, and previously an air traffic controller in San Francisco and Chicago, which makes me wonder if our paths might have ever crossed, Peter, when I was doing the Eyes to the Skies Balloon Fest a few years back up in Lisle, Illinois. We'll talk about that maybe before we go tonight. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here, and it's good to have you. Before we get started, I would like to remind our viewers that you can pose questions for Peter to answer regarding UTMs and Zipline. You can post those in the comments window. I'll be monitoring those, and I'll try to include them in our discussion as we move along tonight where appropriate. We'll try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. Now, one word of advice. If you're logged into your YouTube channel or your YouTube account and your login is something encryptic like, I don't know, Big Blue Balloon 23, if you post a question, do me a favor and add your name to the question, because I think it's just much more civil for me to say John Doe is asking blah, 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 as opposed to saying, oh, Big Blue Balloon number 23 is asking such and such. So just toss your name in there if you would. Let's keep it conversational tonight, okay? With that, let me turn the floor over to Dave Sullivan for some opening remarks, and then we'll move into our briefing and background with Peter on Zipline, and from there, the discussion will take off. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Glenn. As always, good to see you again. Peter, welcome to the BFA.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Great to see you.
We really appreciate your participation. This is obviously an area of concern for our community, and we've been working hard to try to resolve some of the issues. But we've felt in order to bring you guys on, because we're working with your compatriots out there, we felt bringing you in front of the community and giving you a chance to give your pitch, so to speak, and expose yourself to answering some questions might get a better understanding of what you're trying to do, and hopefully you'll get a bit of an understanding of what we want too. Having said that, I know you've got some things you want to tell us about Zipline. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I wanted to give a brief overview of the company and what we're doing. If you don't live in the Dallas area or a handful of other places where we're delivering right now, you might not have crossed paths with us. But we've actually been operating drones for over a decade now. We started doing medical drone deliveries in several countries in Africa, and we still do that to this day. Everything from blood, plasma, antivenom to lab supplies and clinic supplies, and saved a lot of lives that way. Gave us a way to really cut our chops and not only develop a really robust aircraft, but figure out how to fly in really interesting and challenging conditions. We fly a lot in Rwanda where thunderstorms pop up, thermals, all kinds of extreme weather. And that equipped us pretty well when we started operating in the United States at scale over the last couple of years. So I got a brief video that sort of walks you through what it looks like in the United States and a lot of places now. If you order groceries or a meal from us, This is how it gets from the restaurant to your door. So once you place your order, everything our aircraft does is fully autonomous. It plans its own route. It pre-flights itself to make sure its batteries are charged and all its motors are working correctly. It navigates to the pickup location. You saw it lower that droid, that sort of box on a tether, and you can open up the top to place the order in, and then it retracts back in. The aircraft is weighing that package to make sure it matches what it was told was going to be loaded. Navigates itself to the delivery location. It could be your front yard, your backyard, something like that. And it makes the delivery. And when we make the delivery, our aircraft actually stays up about 300 feet in the air and lowers that down. So it's a pretty relatively discreet, quiet experience. You're not getting prop wash or dust or anything like that. And it's certainly not close enough that a person could accidentally get tangled with any of it. If your dog latches onto that as it's making a delivery, our drone is just going to cut the line and leave it on the ground. So nothing gets damaged in the process either. I've had that happen a couple times.
You say 300 feet, Peter. What are your wind limitations? Seems like at 300 feet, you've got a lot of room for opportunity there for your load to go askew. Any chance of that?
Yeah, we've increasingly tested in higher and higher winds because we do need to know the winds aloft, both when we're making a delivery and to make sure we don't encounter too much of a headwind that we inadvertently run out of battery. So we can pretty safely fly in about 20 to 25 knots of wind. When we're at altitude experiencing that, we've actually designed the system so that instead of that droid lowering straight down, we compensate for the wind shifting it. So we will position the drone upwind where the delivery needs to be. So the droid will actually come down at an angle and we'll use the wind to our advantage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I can jump in real quickly, I'm kind of chuckling because I can imagine one of my two cats being outside when a delivery's coming down. Suddenly they're batting at it like it's a cat toy.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of
I've seen the Zip be like 50 meters away from a lightning bolt. I've seen it dock and hail in 70-mile-per-hour winds. Super strong. These Zips can take a lot.
Yeah. So how's that?
Sure that was on cue, was it?
That's okay though. It gives you a glimpse. That's all real world footage from our testing at various test locations. Because it's not just wind, but hail, lightning, heavy snow, sleet, slush. We want to understand if we encounter those conditions, can we make it back safely, even if we have to abort the delivery? And the answer so far has been yes, which is really promising for us, right? The absolute. We don't want these falling out of the sky for anybody for any reason. So it's through all that testing. And it's very extensive testing dating back years. And we actually do thousands of test flights every single day, even still, because we want to make sure the system is really hardened and robust. And just like as pilots, we train for different situations. We need to make sure that our system can handle all those situations as well.
Interesting. All right. So in your lead in, Glenn made the comment, you're the largest drone operator in the world.
Yeah.
Most of your activities have been overseas, primarily Africa, if I understood you correctly.
Mhm.
We don't hear much about you here in the United States. You alluded to operating in Dallas and in one other area.
Yeah.
Where else are you and where are you going?
Yeah, we're in Dallas, Houston, and Pea Ridge, Arkansas right now, and we'll be starting operations in Phoenix pretty soon here. And basically, as we get established in each new city and build things up, then we look to the next one. So we've got a roadmap. It's always shifting around a little bit, but what I'm seeing both from us and from our peers and competitors out there is that we're all starting to expand pretty rapidly to other cities because there's quite a demand for what we're able to do.
That's putting it mildly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the selection or demographic criteria for you going into an area?
It's really not demographic criteria. We look for places where there's clusters of restaurants or stores that we can pick up from, and we partner with those stores. And then we do a lot of outreach with the community, partly to get them excited and so that they know that they can order from us instead of a competing service or company that you might already be using on your phone, but also to do outreach with aviation users so that they know and they can learn about our drones and how they fly and how we integrate with them. So we actually do, as part of that process, helicopter operators, flight schools, but if we locate local hot air balloonists, we'll go out and talk with them. And that helps us understand when they operate and where, because not only do we have onboard real-time, fully autonomous detect and avoid, but we do a lot strategically. If there are areas where we know that helicopters are prevalent, hot air balloons, gliders, paragliders, we'll essentially block off those areas and do a lot of strategic route planning so that we avoid flying through those areas altogether.
Are you primarily partnered to like a Walmart or another major chain, or are you basically like an Uber and delivering from Ponchos and McDonald's and Wendy's and restaurant A, B, C, D, E, plus 4 or 5 different department stores?
It's some of both, Glenn. Walmart is one of our biggest partners, but we want to have a really big selection of restaurants so that depending on what strikes your fancy, what you're in the mood for, you're not just limited to just 1 or 2 of those restaurants. So, what you'll see in Dallas, if you're in the right areas, the app will just keep going and going with options, which is really exciting to see.
Well, the one nice thing about this podcast is lead generation, I guess, because Jameson has just said, please have them contact me for the Phoenix area and given me his email. I'll pass that on to you, Peter, when we're done.
Will do.
Dave?
All right, you brought it up, Peter. Detect and avoid.
Yeah,
that's a big discussion, not only at our level, but that's a huge piece of the proposed Part 108. What is your approach? What is Zipline's approach to detect and avoid?
it's several layers. And we think about integrating in the airspace, whether it's with other drones or with other aircraft, as partly strategic and partly tactical, which is actually what we do with conventional aircraft all the time. We just might not think about it that way. Even an odd 1,000 altitudes for a lot of aircraft, that's strategic, right? That provides a degree of separation that things won't fly head on to each other all the time. So what this looks like anytime we go into new areas, we use a lot of data to analyze the airspace and what's already going on there. While I wish we could deliver your meal to the airport gate, we can't because there's too much other traffic in those areas, right? We understand it's very complex airspace. So it's pretty easy to identify an airport. But there are some interesting patterns that pop up at low altitude when you're able to consume a lot of data like we can. You can see the prevalent helicopter and VFR transition routes at low altitudes. Sometimes those are along a freeway. They might actually be along a railroad track or a river, for example. So we can identify those areas. And in our internal system, they're higher risk. So we try to avoid flying through them or across them if we can. As I mentioned, we do a lot of outreach to different kinds of operators. We want to understand as much about what they're flying, when they're flying, how they fly, and how they're equipped, as we can let them know, what our aircraft look like and how they operate. And that gives us another opportunity to identify those spots where aircraft may fly a lot, and it doesn't make sense for us to be there because we want to keep things really safe and integrate really well. In certain locations, especially outside the Mode C veil, we use visual observers based on the ground that go up in a little kind of an enclosed scissor lift tower so that they have a pretty good view all around. And that's integral for us for what we call non-cooperative aircraft, but that's anything without a transponder. And then, of course, all of our aircraft have ADS-B in on them. So the aircraft will autonomously detect any aircraft that's transmitting ADS-B out, track it, and if our aircraft, our drone, determines that aircraft is coming too close, our drone will automatically take avoidance maneuvers, and it will keep avoiding. It will keep climbing, descending, turning, whatever it needs to do to get away from that other aircraft.
Fair enough. How do you handle non-compliant aircraft?
So that's where our visual observers come in, where we have them in those locations, and they prove really beneficial because, of course, not every aircraft in our airspace has a transponder right now, and you can't actually put a certified transponder on hot air balloons, as far as I know it.
That's correct.
Yeah. So visual observers, of course, are really important there, and some of the good old-fashioned outreach. We try to keep really good relationships with the hot air balloon operators that we know about. And a lot of them now are in the habit of calling us and letting us know in the morning when they're going to take off, or if they're doing an evening flight. And knowing that that'll happen, we'll just pause our operations in that area so that the balloon doesn't have to worry about coming close to our drones.
Yeah, I understand that's working really well in the Dallas area.
Mm-hmm.
Real good cooperation there between the two communities.
Okay. Yeah. And it's, honestly, it's that kind of cooperative effort, whether we're talking newfangled technologies like UTM or just old fashioned text messages and phone calls, works really well to keep everyone aware of what's going on in the airspace.
Good. With just a side question, really, with the new NOTAM system coming out, is that going to provide us more information in the NOTAM itself? That's been a bit of a problem in certain areas on the East Coast, where it's hard to find out who to call on these things. We've had a lot of LEO operations pop up, and they've got, a year-long drone NOTAM posted out there, but you have no idea who the control point is for that. Do you see any change with the new NOTAM system?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure the new NOTAM system is going to help with that, because it simply wasn't designed for this proliferation of different kinds of airspace users. And as you pointed out, it's not just companies like us delivering goods, but it can be law enforcement doing 911 dispatch missions with drones as well. It can be infrastructure inspection, lots of different things. And that NOTAM doesn't really tell you a whole lot, right? Just because there could be a drone flying there for the next year, is it actually going to be there tomorrow at 6 in the morning? I don't know.
Yeah. We had an interesting situation here in North Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. The company that puts out these flock cameras has a contract with the local law enforcement department up there, and they're providing drones to them. So they've got a drone NOTAM for a period or an area, but it's a pop-up drone. You never really know when it's going to be there. And it popped up in front of a air ambulance aircraft. And it got kind of interesting for a few minutes, is my understanding. But I'm hoping that, pardon me?
I can only imagine. I certainly would. I would be startled as a pilot.
I would hope that the new NOTAM system would correct that. We'll see how that works out. Do you guys, do you participate with remote ID for self-identification?
Yep, we're required to use broadcast remote ID on all our drones, and we do. I think it can be difficult to gauge how useful that is, though, because broadcast remote ID, if you're not aware, it uses the same Wi-Fi and Bluetooth frequencies as your phone and your smartwatch and your smart cameras and all those other things. So when you're flying over a suburban area, those frequencies get very saturated. And the effect of that is the broadcast remote ID range can drop to a matter of 100 feet or less. Yes. So unless you're already perilously close, you're not going to get that information in a way that's useful for you if you're another pilot nearby.
It'll be too late at that point in time.
One of the things I'm really excited about that we actually just approved today in the UTM cohort is several of the companies in that cohort are going to start providing network remote ID. So this is the same message format and the same real-time information, but it's carried across a service. So once we get some of these stood up, there's the potential that there will be a web app that anyone can use to look at where are drones flying right now at low altitudes. And that may not help you if you're in the air, if you don't have a cellular connection, but before you take off, it could give you a glimpse. And we really are excited to see how people start using this capability. And especially if it's useful for pilots of conventional aircraft and balloons such as yourselves to have a sense of what's going on.
So
Yeah, there's a
Peter,
very similar system already in play in Europe that, from my contacts over there, it seems to be working very well. And I think it's just a matter of time before that occurs here. I know DOT is working on an app to resolve a lot of these conflict issues. The only big problem being, of course, is that in theory, we're not supposed to be using cell phones off the ground.
Right.
That's not to say that it doesn't happen, but the law specifically states you're not supposed to do that. We'll see how that works out over the long term. Glenn, you had something to say?
yeah, I was just going to try to take this to the larger picture. Peter, you mentioned
Sure.
right now your operations in the United States are fairly limited. Dallas, Houston, and Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Was that what I heard?
That's it.
Never heard of there, but I'll have to look it up. And expanding to Phoenix. So at this point, what I'm hearing tells me that if I'm a balloonist in Dallas or Houston, there's a regional center of some sort with Zipline where I can make contact and say, hey, we're going to be flying out in this area at such and such a day and time. And that all works. Do you have a timeline for expansion nationwide? And when and if you get to that point, will there still be regional hubs so that balloonists in Chicago or Spokane or New Jersey, wherever, can call in, or does this become a massive nationwide network and all sorts of confusion trying to make contact and communicate?
Yeah, it's a good set of questions. So let me try to unpack it. Right now, we're flying several thousand flights a day in the cities where we operate. So if you're not there, it may seem like we don't exist at all. If you are there, we're starting to become ubiquitous. So it's an interesting contrast. And I think what you'll see over the next few years is not just us, but a number of other drone delivery companies will start expanding to as many cities as we can. So this becomes much more common. And to your point, somewhere in there, it's really not scalable to be making phone calls and answering them. And that's where I think we need to look for practical solutions grounded in technology that exists today to help make us aware of each other. And that's where one of the things that's really important for us is what we call electronic conspicuity. And our hope is that once the FAA releases Part 108, we'll have this in there, not just the equipage requirement for manned aircraft, but also the technical capability that's usable for people like balloonists, where the option is not just a certified transponder like it is today, but it could also be a small handheld portable conspicuity device that you can put in your pocket or somewhere in your balloon basket that gives us as a nearby drone operator that same ADS-B signal that we can maneuver around, but it's going to have a shorter range and it's portable. So you can take it from one balloon to your aircraft in the afternoon, loan it to your buddy the next day. And these products actually already exist in the United Kingdom. They cost a few $100s. So our hope is that we'll see a proliferation of options and different price points so that they're available to everybody here in the US as well.
Oh, you and I could talk for hours just on that subject alone, but we won't go there tonight. I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
All right.
All right. So you said 8. Are you, Glenn? You got it? You done?
Yeah. Go ahead,
Okay.
Dave.
You said ADS-B in is operational for you, but you're not on ADS-B out. Want to verify that, correct?
That's correct. And the FAA does not allow us or any other drones to broadcast ADS-B out. That's actually in the federal aviation regulations.
Yeah, and in 108, you're specifically prohibited from doing that.
Right.
So we have a situation now where you can see us, provided we have some sort of EC device, but we are not currently able to see you.
That's right. And that's what happens today anyway, right? And that's why we do all this outreach and why we do so much testing and hardening of our system to make sure that we are able to see you one way or another, whether it's our onboard equipment or our visual observers, because that is going to be really important.
But you are not using any visual aid, if you will, from the aircraft itself, yes?
Not right now. It's something we're exploring, and we're always looking at those other capabilities. Some folks are, but visual sensors have their own shortcomings. If there's backlighting or haze or strange city lights, just like as a manned aircraft operator, you have the same challenges.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Has there?
Go ahead, Glenn.
I'm sorry to jump in here. It's kind of awkward. That raises the question in my mind that we discussed last time. Has there been any testing? Your drones, from the pictures that I've seen online researching and preparing for tonight, are much larger than those of the ones we talked about in the last episode. Has there been any testing yet to determine what happens if there's a collision, your drone to a balloon envelope?
Gosh, offhand, I'm not sure. That's why we make all these efforts to avoid balloons and other aircraft operators, because I'd frankly really rather not find out.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree. We would all rather not find out,
Thank
but
you. We
the
appreciate
inevitable
that.
sometimes happens, and that's why I was just curious, because we discovered last time with that company that Dave, remind me, I've forgotten the company name now as we're talking, but
Wing.
yeah, Wing. We found that they had never done any testing and really didn't have any idea what, if the two collided, would there be damage and to what extent? And my concern with the drones that you operate, as I've seen in the online pictures, are much larger, and therefore the potential for significant damage, if there were an air-to-air contact, would be presumably equally larger. That's why I was curious. Have you done any testing like that? Would you consider doing testing like that if the opportunity were there to make something like that happen?
I think we'd certainly look into it if there's a way to, either test it in a way that, of course, is safe and controlled, or to simulate it to understand. I will say that there's a few features of our drone that are designed intentionally to minimize risk. One is that the photos and the images you see make it look very bulbous, and a lot of that material that comprises the fuselage is actually styrofoam, so it will absorb impact energy and break apart. And our 4 hover motors are on these booms forward and aft of the wings. Those will break off under a certain amount of force and stress as well. And that's actually by design, right? If the prop strikes something, we don't want to carry an asymmetrical prop, but the aircraft can continue to make a safe landing even if it loses one of its motors. So we have features like that. And in a number of situations, if it really came down to it, the aircraft will automatically deploy a parachute as well. And then it's flying under a parachute and much bigger and coming down at a pretty slow speed.
I'm reminded of the first fly-by-wire airplane that my father bought me when I was a kid. It was a T6, T106 trainer aircraft, I forget, but it was plastic and held together by rubber bands. The wing attached to the fuselage by rubber band. The engine was attached to the front of the fuselage by rubber band, so that when I crashed it, unlike the balsa planes that he built and flew that spattered into toothpicks, mine just broke apart into major components, and you went around and picked them all up, put new rubber bands on it, and went back to flying. So I'm hearing you talk about how your drone could impact and then break apart. So, sorry, I just get off on a tangent, but that reminded me of flying that particular airplane, which was a safety feature for a young kid flying an airplane at my age, of course.
Yeah, and it turns out some of those safety features scale up a bit, at least to a certain point.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to see one.
Enough of the tangent. Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
I had the opportunity to see one of your drones up close and personal at a seminar in Statesville. One of your representatives, Emmy, came up from Charlotte and spent a couple hours with us up there. And that was an interesting process. I don't know that it's any bigger than the Wing drone that was brought up for the same seminar session, about the same size, although I think Wing has one they're developing that's slightly larger. So the impact strength is going to be about the same. The one that I'm a little apprehensive about is obviously going to be the Wing Primaire entrant. It's a fairly large system, a little bit more robust as far as structure. If that were to hit a balloon, I think it'd have some serious concerns. While we walk down that road, we talk a lot in aviation, and you're a pilot, so you understand this. We talk about risk management, risk assessment all the time. What is Zipline's risk management program? How does that focus, and what are you guys looking for?
Well, it's really comprehensive. If you didn't realize it, Zipline's a Part 135 certificated air carrier. So we undergo a really extensive review by the FAA. And part of being a 135 operator, just like business jet operators and many other operators, is we have a fully integrated safety management system, or SMS, throughout the company. So we enable safety reports from any Zipline employee. We, of course, have a lot of folks working on the front lines, repairing our aircraft, loading them, monitoring operations, and all the way through the design process and the testing process as well. So we, assess and identify those hazards and risks just like you do before each flight, except we're thinking about it across potentially thousands of flights in many different areas. So we assess population density. When we build up our own internal map, we specifically identify places like schools and parks and freeways as places where we expect there to be more people. So we try to route around a lot of those places and not fly over them as much as possible to minimize that ground risk exposure. And we make a similar three-dimensional map of the airspace where we operate as well. So we use aggregate surveillance data that's available from the FAA and from MIT Lincoln Labs to help us come up with a number for each point in space. And where the number's too high, because it's a heliport or a hospital or a very busy VFR corridor, we'll avoid those places as well. So what you end up with is a sort of multidimensional color-coded heat map that tells us where can we safely fly and where do we need to avoid, because there's either too much ground risk or there's too much air risk. And we share all this with the FAA so they understand as well. And that helps inform our route choices. And then we can tune and test our detect and avoid system to make sure that if it does encounter another aircraft in the air, we're able to safely maneuver and maintain a safe distance from that other aircraft without that other aircraft necessarily even knowing that we're there.
Frank Anger is asking, what's it going to take to develop a true avoidance software? Blood on the runway. You know, we hear that term all the time with the FAA. They don't act, they react to blood on the runway. Frank notes that it's hard to hurt construction cranes that have been involved in drone accidents or apartment buildings that have been hit by drones. So from your perspective, Peter, what is it going to take to develop a true avoidance software?
Well, I think in a lot of respects we already have. I'm really proud of the system we've developed and iterated it over time, improved it over time to add more functionality. And the numbers bear it out, where we simply don't have very many encounters with other manned aircraft. And it's not because they're not there. It's because our system is able to detect them and take a reasonable avoidance action. And we have plenty of interesting cases operationally where we're flying low to the ground and our system is able to autonomously find a way to avoid the other aircraft and avoid descending into terrain and having a controlled flight into terrain accident as well, because we certainly don't want that either. So the system works quite well. The FAA reviews it. We make mandatory reports to the FAA about certain kinds of events. And on top of that, so we have our own proprietary avoidance capability, but there's also capabilities out there like ACAS that are developed jointly by the FAA and academia and universities and industry. And ACAS, you may have heard about in the news, is a capability that even manned aircraft can equip with, like airliners. And that provides this much more granular algorithmic processing that I think is already proving to be very effective, and hopefully we see it deployed more.
Do you agree with the statement then, though, based on what you just said, Peter? It seems like all of it is passive as opposed to an active system as ADS-B out would be. Agree or disagree?
I disagree. Our system is very proactive in taking avoidance action. It works best when that other aircraft has ADS-B out. And that's why having a low-cost, portable, non-certified option that's affordable for all pilots is really important for us to see, because we recognize there are a lot of aircraft that can't equip with a certified ADS-B out transponder. And frankly, you don't need that for us to be able to safely avoid you.
I like the non-certified part. We'll talk. Okay. Going back to what you said on Part 135, which is basically the air regulation that covers airline operations. So you guys are right now, as a construct, you're working under those same parameters, that same outline, if you will. Okay. That's right. With the advent of Part 108, there's a whole new day coming, if you will.
Yeah.
Do you see the 108, the higher numbers in 108 superseding your 135, or is it in addition to?
I think 108 enables us to expand and allows a lot of other safe and responsible drone operators to expand as well. It right sizes the risk framework, right? We don't fly a type certified aircraft. And we don't need to, frankly, because the risk exposure in general is lower. But 108 keeps a lot of the protections in place that we're already using today and that we think are really important. Drones still need to have some kind of detect and avoid. And the FAA is going to take a really close look at ensuring that those systems work as well as they claim to. So any drone operator is going to have that capability. They're going to have to find or buy a drone that is able to do that. So this is really actually going to level up, I think, the whole drone industry. One of the things that concerns me as a pilot for more than 20 years now and an air traffic controller is, in a lot of ways, Part 107 made the barrier to entry for some drone operators too low, where it was almost a toy, right? You could buy a drone off of Amazon or at a big box store, and you were supposed to do some training, but there was nothing to actually require you to do that training. And you could just take it out of the box and fly around. And that's okay if it's a really small drone and it's flown indoors and, it's under 250 grams, which is very small and lightweight handheld. You can't do a lot of damage with that. But we've seen much bigger drones that for a few $1,000s you can buy with essentially still no training and oversight. And Part 108 isn't just the operational framework. It also brings along those core SMS principles and training requirements so that operators are going to have really robust internal procedures for training and maintenance and everything else and reporting, right? So that we can ensure that drones are actually safely integrating into the airspace.
Roger Clark has an interesting question I'll toss in here. And as we're talking about see and avoid and various apps and devices that could be used in a balloon, Roger's point is, and please take no offense, Peter, but I understand his point. His question is, why should balloon pilots buy an affordable system when the drone operators are highly profitable and owned by, he says, huge wealthy companies? I don't know if that's true. You can tell me. Is the drone community working with the FAA on any of the European systems that are already available? I think we addressed a little of that earlier, but his key point, why should it be on the balloonist to buy an affordable system? Why is it that the allegedly larger, more profitable drone operators don't carry more of the burden to see and avoid?
Well, I'll dispel the myth, right? We are not profitable. We are large, but we're not profitable. And I won't speak for the other companies, but we're growing, and our airspace is changing, quite frankly. And I think that it's incumbent on all of us as airspace users, whether you fly a plane or a drone or a hot air balloon, to think about what you equip with. And a lot of us got two-way radios. Even if you don't have an electrical system, you have a handheld radio or something now. And that's actually key, right? To me, that's very analogous, right? That you can use a handheld radio to make VHF transitions. That radio is not certified, but you can still use it to get an IFR clearance. I have one in my flight bag as a backup radio. And that's the way I think about ADS-B out as well, because the reality is that ADS-B is built on standards and it works anywhere in the world. So I would rather us find ways to make the right equipment at the right price point with the right features for all the users that need it than to look for other options, because there are apps that are out there that you can use to track your own hot air balloon flight. But now every drone operator has to integrate with many different technologies and frequencies and apps and capabilities to try to find everybody else. And that really doesn't make sense either. That actually exposes more safety gaps.
Our producer from behind the scenes, Fred Poole, just made the point that when the FAA mandated ADS-B, they actually paid a small portion of the equipment cost, essentially.
That's right, they did.
Do either of you, Dave, you've done a lot of research into this area as well, especially with the European systems that are being brought online. Do either of you seeing the FAA maybe doing something like that as we move forward down this road?
There has been a discussion, and that's really all I can say about that.
I sure hope they do.
It's been brought up.
Okay.
The only problem, Peter, we when I say we, the cosmic we, you, us, most of aviation, and frankly, the FAA, everybody's all focused about ADS-B per se. They keep forgetting that ADS-B ADS-B out doesn't work worth much below 500 feet. I mean, even their own ADS-B coverage maps on the FAA website show that in a number of areas, more so out west than here in the east. There's nothing. Yeah, if you're below,
that's actually not true, Dave. What you're seeing when you look at those coverage maps is the FAA's ability to receive an ADS-B signal from a ground-based antenna bolted to an antenna shack or a control tower. But when we use ADS-B, it's on board our aircraft. So at any altitude, as long as we have line of sight, we won't see your aircraft on the other side of a mountain range.
And that's where I was going, and which is why ADS-B per se is not as easy a solution to this problem as EC would be, electronic conspicuity, because that focuses solely on air-to-air, peer-to-peer transmission receive. I don't care whether they can receive me on the ground.
I think I'm missing your point, because if you're able to transmit in the air and I'm flying in the air, if we're as long as there's not mountains or buildings in between us, then we'll be able to receive your signal.
Well, you get ground clutter too. I mean, down here where I am, we've got rolling hills and a whole lot of trees. I've talked to guys who've been out flying in the area, 400, 500, 600 feet. The ag guys, who of course are now being pushed out of the way by drones. That's a whole different part of the conversation. But the ag guys, their ADSB doesn't work down low, which is why most of them don't bother to equip. And
that frankly is the gap, right? There's no harm in equipping, especially
and that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But
once we have the costs addressed, and I agree that subsidies or incentives are a really important part of this, right? Because you shouldn't have to take on the burden of an unreasonable cost either.
Well, no, but I don't think that an EC system is going to be 5,000 to 7,000 minimum like it was for the fixed wing community. We see units out there now. You kind of alluded to it, Sky Echo unit out of Europe, which has been tested in the United States. The FAA doesn't like it for several different reasons. But even bringing that into the United States, it was about a $900 investment to get it in. They've gone up a little bit. It doesn't broadcast on 978. It receives only. And if we stick to the same parameters that the proposed 108 gives us, it's going to have to broadcast on 978. I'm sure they're working on that issue now. There's at least 4 other manufacturers working that problem with EC. It's just a matter of figuring out who's going to get to the start line first and getting the approval through the FAA. And I can tell you it's not an easy process. And it's not so much the FAA, quite frankly, it's the FCC.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think there's a lot of motivation to get this done right, because let's not forget, one of the worst mid-air collisions we've had recently at DCA, that was an aircraft with a miscalibrated ADS-B transponder that wasn't working correctly in that Black Hawk helicopter, right? That was 2 manned aircraft. So the more we can address the ADS-B out issue, whether it's with certified equipment or portable ADS-B equipment that the FAA and the FCC approve, we start plugging those safety gaps in man-to-man encounters as well, which is good for everybody.
Oh, I agree.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Go ahead.
We're running up toward the end of our usual allotted time slot. But before we go tonight, Peter, what I'd like to hear a little bit about from your perspective with Zipline. You mentioned operations in Dallas and Houston, and we touched very early on in our discussion that the communication between balloonists in those 2 areas with Zipline has been very good. Tell us a little more about that. How is that communication working? What have the relationships been like? How is integrating your service into the areas where the balloonists are flying? How has that been working? Give me just a little more about community relations and where you are with that at this point in those 2 areas where we know there are ballooning operations.
Yeah, it's something we take really seriously, and we invest a lot of time and effort into it because we know it does pay dividends, right? We go to as many community events, fly-ins, flying clubs, and try to find all those operators as we can. And then, give them our contact information so they can reach out to us. And a lot of it, I think, is just like any other aviation user. We're all curious, right? A lot of us are pilots as well of fixed wing aircraft or helicopters. We love talking to other pilots, learning about what you're doing, finding out about your operation. Folks like Emmy on my team have gotten to go paragliding and hot air ballooning as well, right? And it helps us understand how important these operations are for a lot of you are small business owners, and you're part of the community as well. So this really only works when we talk to each other. And I don't see that stopping, right? But on the other hand, we had an interesting event a couple months ago at near one of the Walmarts we're flying, where thank goodness we have those visual observers in a number of places, because that visual observer spotted a hot air balloon coming under 200 feet. And it went right over the Walmart and right across the parking lot. And I can't speak to what was going on with the weather or the operation that the balloonist ended up there, but of course you go where the wind goes. And fortunately, because of that VO, we stopped all our operations, and there were no encounters between our aircraft and the hot air balloonist. And then it gave us the opportunity to drive after and find the balloonist and added them to our Rolodex, so to speak. So we were able to build a relationship that way too.
Roger Clark follows up on that. And we actually discussed this earlier, Roger, in case you missed it. He's asking, can we contact local operators and identify our flying areas? And I think, Peter, you've said that you are doing that, like in Dallas and Houston,
absolutely.
Where you are operating, you are in communication with local balloonists to identify those flying areas. Tom Warren has just jumped in before we wrap up. Let me get to his question real quick. Says, I'm late to this, but isn't requiring see and avoid by the drone companies easier than making all of the others around them change? Well, we kind of addressed that earlier too. I think it's going to be a quid pro quo kind of thing where we're both going to have to be involved. And the two of you have discussed some of the potential apps and devices that are in the works that might help with that. Dave, before we wrap up, any final comments, questions from you tonight?
Sure, I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah,
we'll have to do this again sometime. Got a few new pieces to file away for future reference. Still got a couple of questions. I'll reach out to you tomorrow. We'll see if we can get those resolved. But I look forward to working with Zipline, not only at a personal level, but a professional level in the near future. And I wish you well, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Great talking with you.
Peter, any final comments on your part?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, one of the things that continues to be curious to me is if pilots such as yourselves or anyone else would want a real-time display of where drones are flying so you could see them. We have a lot of the digital capabilities already, so it's relatively little effort to start prototyping. As a pilot myself, I don't necessarily like seeing a lot of clutter on my screens, but that information might be helpful to others. So getting that feedback is also really useful for us as we think about what are the right kinds of solutions to integrate safely.
Outstanding. Peter, as Dave said, and let me reiterate, thank you so much for your participation tonight, for a very open and frank conversation about Zipline and your operations. And we're glad to know that you're working successfully with balloonists in the areas where you operate, and will be, as we said at the start of the show, expanding into the Phoenix area. I'll pass along that contact to you when we get offline tonight. And again, thanks very much for the open and frank conversation. Best of luck to you. And we look forward to continuing this discussion so that your operations and our flight operations can operate safely and effectively in the shared airspace that we are now going to be sharing, it looks like. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
My pleasure. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up tonight's episode of Inside the BFA. Our thanks again to Peter Sachs from being with us this evening, and to Dave Sullivan for joining us to lead the discussion. Remember, we're online live every first Tuesday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Central. As soon as we wrap this show, it will be then available archived for viewing on demand for those who weren't able to join us tonight live. So on behalf of Dave Sullivan and Peter Sachs and our producer behind the scenes, Fred Poole, thanks again for joining us tonight. We'll see you next month on another edition of Inside the BFA. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for viewing this episode of Inside the BFA. Membership in the Balloon Federation of America is your entry into the sport of ballooning, whether you're a pilot, crew, or an enthusiast. Everyone is welcome inside the BFA. For more information, see our website at www.bfa.net.